which leads me very nicely onto the next bit, which is None in Three, what is next? And so I'm going to ask Acting Director Nadia to come back in and present a very short presentation in terms of where we think we're going and what we'd like to achieve. Welcome back, Nadia.
Thank you, Jill. I don't know quite how I'm going to top that, to be honest. Okay, so obviously this forum really marks the end of our GCRF project where Danielle was created. And as you've heard, this is the 5th game that's been created by None in Three, and our 6th one is currently in development at this moment in time. So although this is the end of the GCRF and the completion of Danielle, it isn't the end for us. This is we're going to be continuing, but we've got a few loose ends to tidy up on the project. We've got lots of publications in the pipeline on the go, and we're working still on our Emilio project based in Brazil, which is looking at youth perpetrated online child sexual abuse. So some of the comments I've seen in the chat earlier, it relates to that. So, but it's been developed in Portuguese, very culturally specific to Brazil, but there's obviously some learning that we can bring over later. It now means that we've also put some other funding bids out. So we want to continue the work with that. We can't just sort of have created Danielle, done a little test and leave it to one side. We really need to work on it to scale up and to get it used and out there, making a difference in young people's lives. So we have been busy submitting grant applications, and at the moment we've got 3 that are under review. 2 of them focus on gender-based violence in the UK, and one of them involves the team members from the UK, but isn't actually based on the issues in the UK. So I'm going to start with the wrong way around. I'm going to start with the Nuffield one because it really leads on with what we've just been talking about the Danielle game. No, it doesn't, in a way, but it's because we're going to be looking much more about the youth-based youth perpetrators gender-based violence in young men that are at risk. Now I've seen in the chat lots of people asking about could the game be used in youth justice settings. I think it could, but we also want to develop a game rather than as a primary prevention tool like Danielle has been used, really as a secondary and a tertiary prevention tool for people who are either at risk of or who have known to engaged in some form of gender-based violence. So we've already submitted that bid. We've also submitted a bid to Horizon UK, which isn't just involving the UK, it's actually a 3-country bid with 3 different strands of research. So it's a very ambitious project we're putting together, and it all focuses on tackling sexual violence involving young people. So both young people as perpetrators and young people as victims of sexual violence. So the 3 strands of work are around developing a game and an app for young people, either who've engaged in harmful sexual behaviours or who have been deemed at risk of. And we're also going to trial it in schools for seeing if it could be a primary prevention tool. We're also going to develop an app for young people who have been victims of sexual assault to help them make the decision to report to the police and to gather evidence in a way that actually doesn't mean that their evidence gets contaminated by the giving inconsistent evidence. So often what happens when the police repeatedly question a complainant of sexual assault, the complainant drip feeds information to them as they start to build trust. And unfortunately, because they didn't give all the information at the outset, it's seen as an inconsistent statement, which often gets aligned with being a false allegation. So when we look at the cases of sexual violence, cases against young people are the ones that are most likely to drop out of the criminal justice system. So it's about empowering young people how to actually make that statement to the police and have confidence in doing it. We also recognise that it's not just the victim's problem in the attrition, it's also to do with police not recognising sexual violence in children and young people. So actually developing training to do that. not all of our research was based on doing foundational research to start with. So we do the surveys to work out the nature and the prevalence of the problem. We then do the qualitative research where we really unpick what's going on here. What does this really manifest like? Who's most affected? What are the drivers of this problem? And that then feeds into us developing the game. And I've got to say, we have the most phenomenal games team here, as well as the researchers, because I'm nodding at Sam here, she's sat here. But the team are just amazing in translating our research findings into these amazing immersive games. So our next project that we've got, which is involving the UK team, but not actually been done in the UK, is, as we said, we were doing these games from this GCRF grant in a time of COVID. Who could have predicted that was going to happen? And it just meant that we were unable to actually run the randomised controlled trials of the games in India and Jamaica. So we have submitted an application so that we can actually bring that to fruition before we release these games, because we really want to make sure that they do no harm and that they do good before we actually allow them out there for public consumption. We've also got a couple of applications in preparation. So the first one I think is going to be most interesting to you, and that's about further testing the effectiveness of Danielle, but not just Danielle the game, but Danielle the curriculum activities and the facilitator manual and the game as well. We want to see if it works in different contexts with different age groups. As we saw, we'd only really managed to test it with 13, 14 and 15-year-olds. We want to see if it really goes up. We'd thought we'd developed the game for 14 to 18-year-olds, but we haven't really tested enough 16, 17-year-olds, and maybe even a little bit younger. We want to know if it works in different contexts. Does it have the same impact for people that have already experienced intimate partner violence or sexual violence in their relationships? At the moment, we've only really looked at not behavioural, attitudinal outcomes. But what we want to know is, do they translate into behavioural outcomes for young people? Does it reduce the risk of victimisation? Does it reduce the risk of perpetration? Does it increase chances of actually engaging in bystander behaviours? At the moment, we've only assessed the impact up to a month. We want to know, does this actually work longer? Is there a sustained learning? If you remember back to the graphs that Sam was showing, there was actually an incremental decrease in some of the negative attitudes. And that would suggest that actually there's like a lagged effect of learning. And I'm wondering if that's also true for those young people that didn't seem to have the same level of effectiveness, that it might actually be working for them later on once they enter into these relationships. So for me, this is going to be a really important project. It's also about scaling up. So we've just been talking about the issues to do with technology. So it's giving the team a chance to actually make this as accessible as possible. Are there different groups that we can reach? Is there different platforms we need to use, different forms of media that we can be using? So this is, hopefully we're going to go for a big 4-year project again on this, but to really test this to the nth degree. We're also literally just starting talking about developing an online intervention for perpetrators of intimate partner violence. We've had conversations with Kirklees Council about this a little while ago, the idea that people need to be able to self-refer into something that's anonymous, so they're not ashamed about owning up to having a problem or to try and work out their issues. It could be used at other stages, such as police cautioning stage as well. But having some very early intervention that people can readily access, that will signpost them to other sources of support and help to challenge their behaviour, will be really useful. So we're ongoing with these applications. So what you can see,
Nadia,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Can I just say I can only give you about another 30 seconds?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah. So really what we're doing is we're diversifying a little bit in what we develop. So we're moving beyond primary prevention into secondary and tertiary prevention. And we're also trying to reach new audiences, such as the police and people that are sort of known perpetrators. I think the Ni3UK team have been amazing, but we're becoming increasingly geographically dispersed. But the one thing that unites us is our mission to prevent gender-based violence using rigorous research and innovative digital technologies. So my last part is keep an eye out on our activities and let us know if you want to stay involved with us in any way. So thank you, Jill.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that roundup, if you like, of what we're hoping to plan for Ni3UK.